Hello and welcome to another segment of Western Wisconsin Journal. My name is Jamie Johnson, and today we have two guests from St. Croix County government. We have from the County Board, Chairman Daryl Standafer.
Jamie.
And the County Administrator in St. Croix County, Pat Thompson.
Hi, Jamie.
Thanks for joining us, guys. Now, today we want to talk a little bit about St. Croix County. We've had changes over the years, and we were mentioning off camera that Daryl's one of my more frequent guests, and we've talked about a range of issues. We've talked about the bridge, and we've done debates with people who have run more like forums, actually, candidate forums for different county board seats. I remember Daryl was on when his seat was contested one year, and one of the issues that seems to be coming up and still is in the news is the nursing home. So I thought we'd touch on that, touch on progress on the bridge. But first, before we do that, let's introduce you folks. Now, Daryl, having been on in his current capacity as County Board Chair, you've been in that capacity how long, Daryl?
I'm completing my first term as County Board Chair.
Okay, but you've been on the County Board how long?
Oh, goodness. I was first elected in '84, so I'm running again. This will be my 10th time.
Okay. And is that contiguous then, or continuous?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I know we've had a couple County Board members run and then take some time off and then come back and so forth. And Pat, you're, as County Administrator, kind of a new position here in St. Croix County. Why don't we have Daryl explain set it up, and then we'll have Pat tell us a little bit about your background, where you come from, all right?
Well, every county in Wisconsin is required to have at least an administrative coordinator. And St. Croix County had two predecessors to Pat as administrative coordinators, and each served a decade. And when our last administrative coordinator, Chuck Whiting, who served very successfully for 10 years, decided to resign to ironically become an administrator and move to Faribault, Minnesota, we realized that it was time to transition to the next step. I mean, we're an 80,000 population county and a lot of complexity, and so we began the process then in the fall of 2010 when Chuck resigned. We probably would not have done that had that opening not occurred, but since it did, and we had been informally talking about it for some time, we began the transition process, and we wanted to put in place the structure with committees and expectations and orientation at the board and staff level, so that when we transitioned to an administrator, we didn't say, "Hi, welcome, now fix all this stuff." So we did a lot of work and then engaged in a national search for a new administrator, and Pat came through that process. That took a number of months, and we're exceptionally pleased with that transition and the process, because Pat joined us in June, so he's been with us now a little over 6 months, and I think the evidence is pretty clear that it was not only a proper step, but we got the right guy.
Okay, so to get further follow-up there with the administrative coordinator, as you said, that every county is required, but administrator, not every county in Wisconsin has an administrator, and even fewer have a county executive,
right,
which is different in that it's an elected position versus appointed, as in Pat's situation.
Correct.
So most counties our size have administrators then?
Well, some counties our size still have coordinators, and some smaller counties have administrators.
Okay.
It really depends on the expectations and desire of that county and the county board, I believe. However, I think there becomes a point in the growth of a county, and by growth I mean needs, expectations, and population, when it just makes sense to have an administrator, so you've got one person that is in fact responsible for the organization, like a CEO of an organization, as opposed to an administrative coordinator. I used to joke with Chuck that we expected him to take care of everything, but we gave him no authority to do it. An administrator has that authority.
And so the county board is entrusting some of that they don't have to wait until a county board meeting to approve some things.
Well, I would say that it gets, it moves supervisors in the direction of where they ought to be, and that's policymakers instead of micromanagers.
Very good point. Now, let's talk about that a little bit. Your position as administrator here in St. Croix County less than a year, a little over 6 months.
Yeah, I started in June of 11, so we're coming up on about 7 months on the job.
And Daryl mentioned that this was a national search. And so where did you come from, Pat?
I came from Cincinnati, Ohio. I was the county administrator of Hamilton County, Ohio, and Cincinnati is the county seat, a large urban county of approximately 800 plus population.
800,000.
Correct.
Yeah. So that would be along the order of a Milwaukee County.
Yeah, very similar in size. And Cincinnati is very similar to the city of Milwaukee in terms of its composition, makeup, same type of city.
Now, whereas
in a lot of ways.
Milwaukee County has an executive, were you an executive or administrator in
I was an appointed administrator, appointed by the Board of County Commissioners.
Okay. And how big was their Board of County Commissioners in the county where Cincinnati was?
It was only 3.
Okay.
Most of the counties in the state of Ohio are governed by smaller boards. The County Board Commissioners are elected to serve in a full-time capacity, but the boards in Ohio range in anywhere from 3 to 7 in terms of the makeup, composition, and the number of County Board Commissioners on each board. It varies from county to county, but typically from 3 to 7.
How long were you there?
5.5 years.
And then where were you before that?
Before that, I served as county administrator for Jefferson County, Colorado, which is a western suburb of the city of Denver. There again, it was approximately 500,000 in terms of population. It was more of a suburban county and served there for about 3.5 years.
Well, given their proximity to the metropolitan areas where you were serving, then I would take it those were those growing counties?
Jefferson County was growing. It had a large tax base. It was a bedroom type community for the city of Denver. We had a lot of residents in Jefferson County that actually worked in Denver and resided in Jefferson County. Hamilton County, Ohio, was not a growing county. The county was, experiencing some financial difficulties, and the population over the years I was there was starting to shrink, mostly within the city of Cincinnati.
So would you say that now that you're here in St. Croix County, the situation is closer to what you had in Colorado, just on a slightly smaller scale?
Smaller scale, but financially in very good shape. St. Croix County, and I've told this to the board, they've done a good job over the years managing its finances, managing the budget. The county is doing well considering the national and state economies and the pressure that the state budgeting has on local units of government. St. Croix County has done a good job in managing its resources, and I look to continue that.
Curious, we talked a little bit off camera what we might talk about here today, and we don't have a full audition or itemized questions to ask. So if this is not fair or appropriate questions, we can move to something else. But I was curious. With Ohio, Colorado, and Wisconsin, how those states compare. Obviously, Ohio, much bigger, but from the standpoint of the state government and its relationship to county government, because just like the federal to the state, we have a lot of federal mandates that go unfunded, and then we have the state government mandating that the county provide certain services and so forth. How does Wisconsin compare in general? I know your experience now is limited to more recent. We've had some tumultuous times down in Madison in the last year, but overall, how would you compare Ohio's relationship to the situation you had previously and/or Colorado in the terms of mandates and whether we're in a position where we can follow through on what we're required to do in this county?
Although states vary in terms of how counties are organized within states and the structure of the boards, there's one thing that's very common throughout Colorado, Ohio, and the state of Wisconsin, and that's the counties are actually creatures of the state. And a lot of the services that we provide and a lot of the work that we do is dictated or mandated or called for in statute. We provide that service to the taxpayers of our county in a lot of ways on behalf of the state. And that's true in Wisconsin, it's true in Ohio, and in Colorado. So a lot of the economic pressures that states are under, we are in a lot of ways, we are the recipient of either the good times at the state, or when state budgets are, declining, we feel it.
Okay. Well, other than North Dakota and Alaska, two states that happen to jump to mind right away that aren't having any fiscal problems, they've got plenty of money. Generally, I would think, and I've been hearing situations like in Ohio where governments are paring down and getting rid of lots of government jobs, and we've lost government jobs in this state, or are we? That's the question. That's what the public relations or the media is saying. Are we facing that here in St. Croix County, where we'll have loss of jobs, I guess doing more or doing less with less?
Are you talking about county jobs,
yes,
or are you talking about
jobs.
the private sector?
I'm talking about, well, specifically the county jobs here, the functions that you're saying that the state is mandating that you perform.
My impression is that I don't see our workforce growing any. I see it contracting, but in a smart way. We're not just reducing staff. We're looking at positions as they through attrition. We look at positions when they become vacant. We don't automatically fill positions that become vacant. We look at whether or not departments can reorganize or restructure. Are there ways to have staff from other offices work with offices that typically they haven't before to still provide a good level of service to the taxpayers, but yet realizing that we have fewer dollars to meet payroll, we have fewer dollars to balance our budgets. I think it's smart that we look at our staffing and make a very conscientious effort to try to reduce the costs of personnel.
Right, and which is your largest budget item.
Yes.
And second, I saw on the website, which I think we should not forget to mention, and that's the www.co.saint, the word saint, -croix.wi.us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a great website. People can learn a lot more of the specifics. So I won't try to get into all the budgets, because if people want to look at the different approved budgets for the last 6 years, you can do that. There's on the county administrator's office, which is your office, and that's a page on the website. People can get all kinds of detail and so forth.
I think when we talk about the budget, I think I was looking through prior year's budgets before I came over today, and in 2008, the St. Croix County's budget was a little over $93 million. In 2011, our budget is approximately $70 million. And that's over a 4-year period of time. Our budget has been reduced by well over 25%. And so,
what's the explanation for how we were able to shed that much of spending on the government side?
It's just a matter of making do within the available resources. I mean, a lot of our budget is, like I said, determined by the available resources. In other words, revenue, either state, federal, or the local property tax. And I think the County Board of Supervisors has done a good job of keeping the property tax level either at or below the prior year. And so we have been able, through reductions in programs, reductions in staffing, realignment of personnel, looking at our not only payroll but our benefit levels. We've been able to reduce costs.
Okay. Well, other than the budgetary constraints and fiscal issues that come up every year, what do you see as the challenges that this county faces, whether it's next year or 5 years from now, 10 years from now, as you come into this job?
Well, I think certainly financial issues will be front and center for the next several years. How to maintain balanced budgets given the available resources, and I don't see that improving anytime soon. So I think that will be one of our biggest challenges.
Well, what we've seen in those years that you mentioned, 2008 it was 93 million, and then now it's 70 million or a little more than that. But we've had this recession that's been supposedly ended a while back, but we haven't had the kind of growth. Now, when we finally do get into some good times economically, are we going to have the growth? What is it that drives spending in this county? And maybe, Daryl, you want to add to that if you've had the broad experience and the history there with St. Croix County and seen it grow over those years. So,
frankly, a lot of it is expectation. What do people expect in terms of services and programs? We've been able to reduce a number of those areas appropriately, as Pat pointed out. One of the significant reductions is when we established the Aging and Resource Center. That made a significant transition in the Health and Human Services area. I think that going forward, the biggest challenge is going to be how do we do our work? We have some space needs in the county right now because we have a building on the New Richmond campus where we have a number of our Health and Human Service employees. I'm not talking about the nursing home, I'm talking about the employees in a number of areas that are in an obsolete building. And so we have been very carefully looking at space needs, and one of the big challenges that Pat has right now is looking at how do we do work? Do we need an office space for every employee? Do we have employees that are out in the field and can share office space? And of course, technology is assisting us in how we do work. So the reduction in the workforce, I think, is going to go hand in hand with what Pat earlier said, as we find new and innovative ways to deliver service to a public that still has a high level of expectation. Some of the expectations will need to change in terms of how that service is delivered.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, you had mentioned, you said you weren't talking about the nursing home, but let's talk about the nursing home now. That was the subject of an advisory, non-binding referendum, I guess would be the correct term. Was it a little shy of 2 years ago?
Yes, I believe that was in '08.
Oh, so it's a little more than that, okay.
I think it was in the spring of '08 when that referendum was held.
Okay. I thought it was more recent than that, but regardless, it came out that, the public at least that voted, it was non-binding on the county board, but thought it was worthwhile to keep the county home open.
On that day, on that question, yes, it was an affirmative vote.
And now there's been talk about having another referendum, same thing, non-binding, so forth. And where does that stand? There was going to be a resolution in that regard, and then that causes things to happen at these upcoming elections. So,
well, we had county board yesterday, so your question is fairly timely. After some spirited discussion on a vote, I believe 11 to 7. I believe on a vote of 11 to 7, a resolution was approved to have another non-binding referendum. The question would be worded a little bit differently, perhaps a bit more specifically, and the explanation of what either a yes or a no vote means is perhaps more expansive and will indicate a yes vote means an expectation of this amount of levy dollars going, at least it attaches to the budget. A no vote would mean no, there should be no levy dollars going to the nursing home. So from that standpoint, perhaps it's positive. In the interest of full disclosure, I voted no. I think that it, frankly, is unwise to have the referendum question, because I think that's why we're elected. We're elected to make decisions, and I would be candid, a frustration that I have had for a number of years is that our board is reluctant to make a decision, and this has been a contentious issue for a number of years.
Okay, so explain a little more background too, because when the first referendum happened, there was an even larger board, and so what tends to happen when government grows is even more difficult to get things done. It seems, my personal opinion maybe, but, and so the expectation was to downsize the board, and didn't go as far as the county where Pat came from, go down to 3, but you went down to 19, is that correct?
Right.
And it had been at 32?
31.
31, all right. Need that odd number for voting ties, right?
It probably makes sense to have an odd number.
Right. So, but at that, so it's still fairly close to put this back on the ballot, but to give further background for our viewers, and there's some that follow it more closely than others, but they may question, so the county is in the business of running nursing homes. Isn't that what private sector nursing homes are for? And what was the impetus for starting it? And then I know that it's been a high agenda item on several county board members that I was familiar with, that they wanted to see the county be either out of that business or at least not using levy tax dollars and have it try to be self-supporting. If it can't self-support, then let those folks go to the private care facilities. So do you have something more to be able to add to that to give us a little more reasoning behind what this next referendum or next resolution was talking about?
Yeah, I guess I would say I agree with everything you just said.
Okay.
That's right. You've capsulized it. And the reason that I have felt for the entire time I've been on the board that we should not be in the nursing home business is I don't think that we should be competing with private industry. I mean, clearly that's my orientation. The ballot question this time I also felt was a bit disingenuous, really, because you're probably aware that we were able to negotiate with the nursing home union last year for significant concessions, and they agreed to those concessions. And the direction that the board, the full board, had from the Health and Human Services Board was to see if we could achieve sufficient concessions from the employees to achieve operational stability in the nursing home without tax levy dollars. That
And
was
how
the
many
direction.
tax levy dollars are we talking about? Because we've got a general size of the budget, and so we've got scope
I think
there.
the budget this year, the budget amount this year is what? About 313,000. Is that
Right.
I'm trying to remember the amount that's in there. I
Right.
think that's it.
The tax levy
Right,
amount,
right.
right.
And we were able to achieve in a voluntary agreement, and the employees ratified it, over $500,000 of concessions over that 2-year period, which extends to the end of 2012. We're still in the middle of that, and we're still in a period of testing to see if that can be achieved. And that's why I think a number of us felt that it was inappropriate to now say, again, in effect to the public, well, maybe we've changed our mind. Maybe we're okay with having a nursing home requiring levy dollars. But it now is what it is. There will be a referendum in April, and the question will be asked, should St. Croix County continue to operate a public nursing home in New Richmond if the expectation of property tax dollars is, and then we plug in the levy amount, and that's what a yes vote means. A no vote means that you're saying that no levy dollars should be used to support the county home in New Richmond. So,
So with the
perhaps
dollar
it'd be more
number,
clarity, but
Right.
it's still a non-binding referendum.
okay, so the dollar amount would it be put in there as kind of like a cap? Because I mean, if you put in this year's number, it could be something different.
No, it's not put in there as a cap. It's put in there as this is what it is.
Okay.
So
Right.
that people can see the framework.
Okay, and would they be, because that 300,000 is spread throughout the 85,000 residents in the county, right?
Right.
It would be, right.
You mean as far as collection?
Right.
Oh, yes, I guess you could make that case.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it comes out to about $4 a resident to use the tax dollars per person. But it might have a different breakdown if you're looking at properties and commercial versus business. But none of that kind of detail is going to be part of the referendum for sure, but would it be in the explanation materials leading up to it, do you think?
No, people could make their own comparison, but again, back to what you started with. We have that public nursing home in New Richmond that if it cannot achieve operational stability, it's backfilled with taxpayer dollars. The taxpayers pick up that deficit. The other county homes, the private homes, don't have that opportunity. They have to be successful or they go out of business. So it seems unfair to have the taxpayers be supporting one nursing home at the expense of the others.
Okay, and so well, using your experience in these other counties, have you heard of that? Have you seen homes for the aging?
Well, I mean,
where it's used tax dollars?
I've worked in 2 different counties in Wisconsin too. I began my career in Dunn County, Wisconsin, which at the time did own a nursing home and still does, and I believe is debating whether or not to build a new nursing home. And I don't know the exact status of their decision as a board in Dunn County. I also worked in La Crosse County. La Crosse County actually owned 2 nursing homes. And
so it's not uncommon in Wisconsin.
It's not uncommon in Wisconsin, but in Colorado and in Ohio, neither county owned and operated nursing homes. I believe, I can't speak for other states, but the states I've worked in, it seems to be more of a Wisconsin county, a function of county governments in the state of Wisconsin versus other states that I've worked in.
Although the trend in Wisconsin is for counties to exit that business.
Okay.
The trend line is down.
And is it because occupancy rates? I mean, are occupancies rates at county facilities less than at private facilities?
No, I would say they're probably roughly the same. But if you would aggregate all the nursing homes in St. Croix County, right now there are approximately, I think the number is about 100.
Yeah.
About 100 empty beds in the county. Right,
Mm-hmm.
and the population of our nursing home averages about 60. So there are more empty beds in the county than what we have population at our facility.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, and now the other issue that would affect, St. Croix County for years and years to come, and has been a long time in coming, and that is the bridge. I suppose, Pat, back when you were in Dunn County, there was probably talk then about the bridge at Stillwater being approved, trying to get support for that. There's been lawsuits and lobbying efforts by really only one organization against it, but and then there was consensus and all, but that one organization was on board saying that this was the type of bridge that needs to be built. It's pending in front of Congress. Daryl came on our show now back in September, so already 4 months ago, in which he talked about his trip to Washington, D.C. and the process to get it approved at the committee level. Now it's been languishing a bit, or is this normal time for this to be considered by the body as a whole on Congress's side?
Well, perhaps languishing a bit because that's normal for Congress. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
It's become the mode of operation.
It is extremely contentious and very partisan in Washington right now. I guess that would not surprise anyone.
Right.
And
understatement of the year, probably.
I guess so. The irony is that because of that, this project likely has a higher degree of success in the spring when Congress comes back in January. They'll come back on the 17th of January. And the approval process has gone through committees in both the Senate and in the House. And it's now ready to be scheduled for a floor vote on both sides. One of the chief authors is Senator Klobuchar from Minnesota. And she indicated in our most recent conversation that because of the contentious nature, this is a bill on a bipartisan basis that people can sign on to and point to that they helped to move forward some bipartisan legislation. It's really interesting. We're not asking for any money. The money is all set aside, and the authority for the bonding in both Minnesota and Wisconsin is established. We're just asking for authorization. And the unique thing about this, Jamie, as you pointed out, there was a federally funded mediation process that extended over 3 years. And there were 27 identified stakeholder groups that spent 3 years coming to what could everybody live with in terms of location and design and structure and retention of the existing lift bridge and everything. As that process wound out, 26 of the 27 stakeholder groups did sign off on it. And that is the project now that is moving forward. I was really encouraged. The very end of the year, the largest newspaper in the area, the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, finally had an extremely positive editorial saying the time is now, let's get it done. This is the only bridge that's going to get permitted and built, so let's move forward with it.
Okay. So is there a website that people can go to kind of keep up with what the progress of that bill, or I know that you were putting together an organization that...
Yes, I'm a member of the executive committee for the Coalition for the New River Crossing. Yes, there is a website. I guess I'm reluctant negligent in not bringing that card with me. It's just St. Croix River Crossing.
Just Google that.
Just Google it, you'd find it. It's right there. It's pretty easy to find.
Well, and I know that you're, unfortunately, it won't help the viewers of this program because this will be rebroadcast later, but you're going to be doing a debate of sorts with someone from the Sierra Club. And that's
Actually,
the one of the 27 stakeholders that wouldn't buy onto this project.
So you've got a good memory. We mentioned that earlier. Yes, tomorrow night, which will be Thursday. I don't know when this will be broadcast, on Thursday the 5th. Yes, I am going to be doing a live call-in debate on Wisconsin Public Radio with a member of the Sierra Club.
And not that we're going to rehearse a whole debate, but I mean, obviously Cincinnati's a river town, and they have crossings and so forth. Pat, what would be your take on this part of it? I mean, it seems to be something that's been a long time in coming. We know every spring, anybody that lives in this community or works in this community, when they close that lift bridge because of the high water in the spring, what that does to traffic here in town. And there is no one, not even the Sierra Club, that's saying that we should just continue with the lift bridge, because that lift bridge is dangerous as it is now, and it's not going to have a long life.
Right.
There are great plans, environmentalists are in favor, and historians about keeping it as a walking bridge or whatever. But we need a new bridge, and it comes down to, I guess, whether it's 2-lane or 4-lane. Is that basically the primary argument? And do you see that being short-sighted as far as keeping it a 2-lane, in the sense of you've obviously worked in larger communities, but with this...
In Hamilton County, we had a similar situation with a much larger bridge that crossed the Ohio River between Ohio and Kentucky. It's called the Brent Spence Bridge. In fact, President Obama, I believe, when he was making his road tour to promote his jobs bill, I think he appeared before that bridge in the state of Ohio. I was hoping that the president would have made the trip to Minnesota and Wisconsin to stand before the Stillwater Bridge, because I've crossed both bridges, I've traveled both bridges quite a bit, and we have a very serious safety issue here. The Brent Spence Bridge was more cosmetic in nature. The federal government has decided to proceed with that project, and I'm hopeful that Congress will take the necessary action to allow this project to move forward. I think it's a safety issue. It's a transportation issue. It's an economic development issue for both St. Croix County and not only St. Croix County, but this whole part of the state, along with the state of Minnesota. And I think both governors, both state Senate delegations, congressional delegations have all signed on. This,
At least
I
the ones that are
believe, is-
contiguous to the river anyway.
it's been studied, and I think it's time for Congress to take action one way or the other.
And we said this is not a funding bill; it's just authorization to move this thing forward. The money for the bridge, it's not going to get cheaper if this thing gets pushed off into the future.
Well, this is the frustrating process. Every day, every month that goes by, costs go up. I've been fairly intimately involved in this for nearly 15 years now. And a close personal friend of mine, John Soderberg, also a banker, retired banker. Retired bankers work on bridges, I guess, from New Richmond. John and I were in Washington this fall working on this. John and I were there over a dozen years ago doing this, and when we looked at a picture, and both of us were younger and had hair, and if the bridge had been built at that time, it would have been approximately half the cost that it is now. So every delay is significant, and the people that are bemoaning the fact that it's so expensive now, it's expensive for two primary reasons. One, because it's taken so long to get it built, and the process has been so cumbersome. But the other thing that gets lost is that this is not just a bridge. This is a major infrastructure project. This is a 7.2 mile project with the access that comes to it on both sides of the river, the bridge itself, the environmental mediation. It's a major, and I would add one more thing to what Pat earlier said in terms of what it is. It's also a jobs project.
Right.
This is one of the reasons that the trades are very supportive of what we're doing, and we had 3 representatives of organized labor on our trip last fall because they see this as critical to putting their people to work. This would employ thousands of people for approximately 3 years while this bridge is being built.
And jobs would be helpful at this time.
Absolutely.
I had not let you, I think, finish or at least answer the question I had posed about what's the primary issue from the other side, those opposing the bridge. Is it basically, it's not needed. We have the crossing at Hudson, and it's not needed. In fact, it's a bad thing to have a bridge crossing there. Just have no bridge, and it would be better because it's going to discourage growth, unneeded urban growth on the St. Croix County side.
I think that's their argument. They don't put it in those words. They say we need a bridge, but we don't need this bridge. Well, but the only bridge that's going to get built and permitted is this bridge. Even assuming their so-called lower, slower 3-lane, which is a 1-lane or reversible traffic that they're promoting, could be built, it would be years down the road because it would require all kinds of new reviews, all kinds of permitting process. Everybody has rejected it. The mediation process rejected it. MnDOT just issued a white paper explaining why it would be so difficult to not only design, but the cost of it is roughly the same cost as this. And probably the most important, this is really cool. The editorial that was just in the St. Paul paper, the Minneapolis paper, apologize to the Tribune people. In our view, the diagonal bridge would create a visual eyesore across a huge swath of the landscape, whereas the preferred 4-lane project is a direct bluff-to-bluff route. And I think that is one of the primary objections of most of the people that live right in the river, that love the river. I'm a boater, I love the river. Why would you want to do anything to impact with visual degradation a project that would cut diagonally in front of Stillwater and destroy the view?
So my earlier assessment that it's a 4-lane versus 2-lane is not really right. It's really 4-lane versus 3-lane, and a 3-lane that really can't be built anyway.
A 3-lane that would be a bottleneck the day it would be built. It would be an obsolete project. 4-lane infrastructure on both sides trying to move traffic through a 3-lane crossing. MnDOT says it's just ludicrous on its face.
But the 4-lane is 2 lanes in each direction. That is the
Right.
preferred and approved.
Right.
All right, just to clarify. Well, very good. Well, we've been talking here a while. Do you have any other issues that you see as being, to the forefront here in St. Croix County?
A continuation, I think, of a number of the good things that we have going right now. We've got an excellent workforce. We've got senior employees that have been here for a number of years. That brings a lot of experience. That translates into, I think, quality delivery of services, and that's really what county government is about. I mean, we're not building widgets, so we're delivering services. We're providing public protection, sheriffs, courts, building roads, doing the things that private business can't do.
Okay.
And the workforce cares. I mean, they care about those services, and they take pride in the work that they perform. And it's real evident to me as county administrator that the 600 plus employees that we have working, providing those services that Daryl mentioned are coming to work day in and day out and doing a good job at what they've been asked to do. And we as a board, or Daryl as the board chair and myself as administrator, need to make sure that within the available resources that we provide the workforce what they need to get the job done, whatever that means. And so that's my job, is to make sure the workforce has what they need to perform a high level of service and within available resources, and keeping the taxpayer, the citizens of St. Croix County as our customer.
Okay, now you touched on a good point, and that is the working together. I know that the administration committee, under the new committee structure of the new board, you work closely with that group. And it was now going on 5 years ago when they had the plan for a plan, and that had gone through it. Is that in the works? Do you see that as something that's needed to be updated, or start over from scratch, or just continue what the plan was from 5 or 6 years ago?
You might not even know what the plan for a plan is. We wrestled with that for a long time, and that was simply, can we develop a plan to transition some of our unneeded, I guess that's probably the best way to phrase it, unneeded land assets. The two largest parcels that we have in the county are the county farm at New Richmond and land around the government center. I think there is, because of some transition on the board, I think there is an orientation to be more amenable to consider that, to be able to visualize, do we in fact ever have a strategic need for this property? And if not, then we ought to transition out of it, and it ought to have a better use than just sitting vacant and frankly off the tax rolls. And as we continue to move forward and look at things, I think it's going to also put us in an environment that I think is important, and that is more cooperation with other local units of government, whether it's the city here of Hudson, or it's the city of New Richmond in terms of the use of the land, or it's simply cooperatively both entities deciding that neither has a use for the land and transitioning to a public entity.
Well, and so that's something that yet to be determined, because again, you're still assessing your space needs and how you're going to perform your services in the new ways. Also, not the best time to necessarily be selling land assets either in this.
Well, things are always worth what they're worth. I used to get pretty frustrated at people that would simply say, we should not sell this land today because it's going to be worth more in the future. Well, that really is a plan never to sell it, because if you follow that logic, you'd never sell it, it'll always be worth more. Right. I think something is worth what it's worth at a given time. I indicated I was a retired banker, so what is something worth? It's what the market will pay for it. And Pat has probably got some good experience to that, because he's got a house in Ohio that he wants to sell, and it's a down market. But he's looking at houses here in a down market. So,
right.
Everything is a trade-off.
Right. And I think the county needs to look at its land assets and develop a smart plan for the use of that, and if there is no future plan for the use of those land assets, then why are we hanging on to them?
Okay.
For what purpose? I think we need to turn that over and let the market kind of dictate what the best use of that land is once the county board has weighed in and said, that these are going to be our future needs, and then what's left, we need to let it go.
Well, very good. Well, thank you for coming on as guests, and hopefully we've shared with our viewers and maybe some of the other counties what's going on here in St. Croix County. But as you pointed out, it's really some of the same issues all over, no matter what state you're in or what part of Wisconsin. You still have those certain basic services that counties are expected to provide, and we hope to do that in the most efficient. And I saw your mission statement, and fiscally responsible. I like that. So, again, thank you for joining us as well. And if you have any questions, go to the St. Croix website, which is www.co.st-croix.wi.us. If you have any questions about St. Croix County or need more information, or give Pat a call, right?
Yeah, thanks, Jamie.
Thank you, and thank you,
Jamie.
Daryl.
Appreciate it.
You bet.